All right, good morning, everyone. We definitely were not talking about things that we can't talk about now. We were just talking about things like wildflowers and the fact that today is going to be the nicest day of the fall, the last day. That's all we were talking about. Just anyone wants to know, nothing else. Let me see. So today's lecture is entitled Pope Benedict the 15th and the Hope for Peace. All peace talks up to 1917. Like I said, last class, we recapped really nicely, I think, really effectively the chronology up until early 1917, which is a nice coinciding point with when the Americans, when we enter the war. We are not going to pick up that chronology for a few more classes still. We are going to today detail what I just told you and what is on the board. And then next class, we talk about Rasputin, all about Rasputin. Actually, next class will be the most kind of background heavy class, arguably, since the first two classes, since the pre-war period in this class, because Rasputin and his, etc., whatever you want to call that, his outsized personality, scandal, intrigue, has direct influences on the Russian Revolution and the war itself. But we also want to get a feel of who this guy is. I'm going to be reading to you next class a lot from this wonderful biography of Rasputin that I read this summer. And I'll tell you something weird. This is true. Anyone been to Cougar Country Drive-In in Pullman?
Years ago.
They make the most delicious Blizzard knockoff. Blizzard from Dairy Queen. Everyone's familiar, obviously. They make a better one. It's called Cyclone. And I love ice cream. It's one of my vices. Like I would say, like I said, I don't smoke anything. I don't like hard alcohol. I love beer and I love ice cream. Beer and ice cream. Like if I have an ultimate Easter, like we're going to celebrate Lent being over, it's like gallons of ice cream, jugs of beer.
Ice cream floats.
Yeah. And like exactly a beer float. Yeah, but not root beer, right? Minus the root. And continuing word association, Root Sports Network covers Seattle and Pacific Northwest sports. So there you go. How's that for a connection? Back to what matters. Cougar Country Cyclones. They give you this thing that's like 6,000 calories of cookie dough, of like actual cookie dough, better than Dairy Queen. And I will always associate Cougar Country Cyclone with Rasputin because over the summer, while reading this biography, I had a bunch of cyclones. And so Rasputin makes me hungry for cookie dough ice cream. Like his name, I associate the name Rasputin with amazing super butter whipped rich ice cream from Cougar Country Drive-In.
So you're the new Pavlov kind of thing.
Yeah, Rasputin.
He was Russian too.
Well, he was, and they say Rasputin had this like, kind of magnetic pull on people. Through his book, he reached for the grave to make me addicted to Cougar Country ice cream. I mean, props to him. It's pretty good work, you know. Next class, we are going to be focusing a lot on this biography by this man named Douglas Smith, and a lot about his life, Rasputin's life. After that, I believe we might jump right into Our Lady of Fatima, or we go to the Russian Revolution. It's something like the next four classes are Rasputin, the Revolution twice, and Our Lady of Fatima, one lecture totally on her and the apparitions in there as well. So really the next 2 weeks is kind of focused on that before we really, the same way we crushed the chronology after starting off with the background, we went like 6 classes in a row or 8 classes in a row, just Eastern Western Front. We're going to do that again before drawing the class to a close and talking about Versailles, the Spanish flu, all that kind of stuff. Okay. Anyone have any questions? Anything before we start? I don't ask you all that enough. Anyone on Zoom have a question? Oh wait, there's no one on Zoom. So yeah, guess not.
Have you ever found out why the Zoom has changed the length or whatever?
I think it was in a bad relationship, got embittered at the past and decided to try a new Zoom, you know, new way of Zooming and lean less forward, requiring passcodes and stuff. So
what's the opposite of Zoom? Maybe it's just taking a gentler.
Boom. It's almost alphabetically opposite. Z is the 26th letter of the alphabet.
Yeah.
B is the second. So you go Zoom for boom, but you leave a little bit of space because right? Like, that's life, right? Am I right?
Yeah.
It's so effing bad. It's so garbage. It's so stupid. Okay, get started. No, why are you guys laughing though? It's really so dumb. Why are you guys laughing?
We're not laughing with you.
We're not laughing with you. We're laughing
We're just gonna stop.
not at you because of you. The mere thought is laughter. Okay, peace initiatives. July crisis, question mark. Five considerations, louder considerations that ask you, or I am asking you, the audience, everyone listening later on, all the lazy people that are too lazy to come to class, thanks for nothing.
I'll pass that on.
Pass that along to freaking everybody, tell the whole world. This first question, this first subsection deals with 5 possibilities, I would argue, to where, because it's about peace initiatives today, right? Obviously, where the war might have been avoided before we got to where we are. You all who have been following the class know where we are and how awful it's been. You know about first Ypres and Bolimov and the gas attacks on the Western and Eastern Front, respectively. You know about the horror of trench warfare. You know about the needless human wave attrition of July 1st, 1916, the first day on the Somme. You know about the first month of casualties in the war being almost equal to what the entirety of the 4 years of casualties in the American Civil War, the unprecedented death. What are the 5 considerations in July during the July crisis? What is the July crisis? New people joining us today, maybe for the first time. The July crisis commences in earnest actually in June 28th of 1914, when Franz Ferdinand, his wife, the Archduchess Sophie, and their unborn child are murdered by a terrorist named Gavrilo Princip. We covered this in the first class a couple times, the earlier part of the class. That commences over the following month into July, the great question of, will we go to war? What will it look like? And A1 is the first thing. A1 reads, you can't see this on Zoom, I'm sorry, the green ink is a bad choice for Zoom readability. What A1 says is localized immediate response versus delay. The first way the July crisis could have been avoided, all right, or could have had let's say not avoided, because once the assassination happens, it's the snowballs rolling down the hill. How it could have been resolved peacefully, and we could have avoided what comes next, was if perhaps the Austro-Hungarians had an immediate response. If they immediately would have gone in and occupied Belgrade, immediately would have attacked Serbia and said, this is in response to you assassinating our heir to the throne. Remember, Franz Ferdinand was going to become Kaiser, and Franz Josef, who dies during the war, he's going to die at 83 years old after he's been on the throne for 1 million years, right? For literally 60 years or so, and that's 1848. Franz Josef already is an old man. He's 83 back then, right? He's like 100 now. So Franz Ferdinand isn't just the heir presumptive. They're like, he's going to take the throne any day now. It's like Queen Elizabeth in England right now. I wish her 30 more years, but she's 95 years old. I mean, how much longer will she live? Maybe she'll have to be 107, 12, and that's amazing. And I hope she lives to be 117. It's just, there's definitely this thought of like, Prince Charles any day could become King of England. And that's the same kind of thing here going on in the July crisis with the assassination. And all historians say, almost to a man, to a woman, all scholars, that if Austro-Hungary reacts immediately, all of Europe is going to be cool with that. They're going to be like, of course, they assassinated your Kaiser to be. It could have been localized. The first way the July crisis resolves well, avoids the war. Austro-Hungary acts decisively, keeps the war local. The stop in Belgrade plan, they plan weeks into this. If they initiate that immediately, we're not going to go in and destroy all of Serbia. We're just going to make people they're going to make them pay. The government is obviously behind it, right? We're not going to wait for investigations and kind of like diversions and rabbit holes. And I don't know, we've had this problem with Serbia for a long time now. The Austro-Hungarians would say, right? If they resolve that immediately, that might solve the July crisis before anything happens. They don't. They delay. They get the blank check from Kaiser Wilhelm on July 5th. And pretty soon it becomes apparent, I think Konrad von Hotzendorf, remember the guy who wants to declare war on Serbia every day of the week? I think he's using this as a pretext. He actually wants to start a larger kind of thing. Okay, so number one, A1 fails. What about A2? Cousins, Russia, Great Britain, Germany. They're all cousins, right? All related in some way. Tsar Nicholas, King Edward, and Wilhelm in Germany. They're all related to Queen Victoria. We had Queen Victoria's portrait up in one of the earlier classes, not just because, oh, she's a great queen and she's famous and all that, is true, but she's directly, intimately tied to the First World War because she's kind of literally the mother of the war, the grandmother, however you want to say it, the matriarch of the war. There are these Willie Nicky letters later in the July crisis, right, where Wilhelm is writing to Nicholas, and they're discussing stuff. Maybe they should have immediately got to that. And maybe they are paper tigers. Well, certainly in Britain, ever since the revolution of 1688, the king can't rule by fiat. Well, freaking Tsar Nicholas is an absolute monarch. Tsar Nicholas has total power. Yeah, it's been reduced a little bit by the Duma. And if you're like, what does this mean? Hold your horses to next week. We're going to talk about the revolution in 1905. Prior to 1905, if Maria was Empress of Russia, literally, she would rule by complete fiat. Whatever she said had to be done. If she ordered me as her subject to jump out that window now, I'd have to do it, no questions asked. And I'm being facetious, but it was like just there was no process, just whatever she says has to be done. After 1905, the Tsar's power is a little bit restricted, but it's still almost absolute. And Wilhelm's power is pretty strong as well in Germany. Maybe those cousins, maybe delay is the keyword too. Maybe they shouldn't wait until later in the conflict to start talking about stuff. Wilhelm gives the blank check and he has second thoughts when it's too late already. Remember, and his own ministers, the German ministers tell Wilhelm, dude, if you keep with this peace BS, we're just gonna like abdicate you forcibly. We're gonna remove you or it's gonna go over your head. It's too late for that now. Delay in keeping it localized, delay in the cousins talking to one another, both those things in tandem. The delay is fatal. All right. What's the saying? You know, he who delays is lost. He who hesitates is lost. It's like a pithy, something like that. Yeah, there you go. So in both cases, he who hesitates is lost. How about number 3? Germany fear Russia, 1917, arrow up, all fear of Germany. A lot of this gets underway because the Germans think maybe, remember they feel encircled, they fear, and indeed, Russia, which is the most populous nation in Europe by far at this time, they have this great rearmament program, that by 1917, they're going to have an elite military, which they don't at this time. They'll have all the new gadgets, the best tech. And the French in some ways are funding this, whether I forget if it's in whole or just in part. It's like when you go onto YouTube and you see, you know, this channel is funded in whole or in part by the American government, the Russian government. I don't know if the French are fully funding the Russians or partially, but they're funding them. And the Germans are like, if we don't strike now, run another, you know, kind of like saying, strike while the iron's hot. If we don't do that now, we're going to be overwhelmed soon by the demographic power the Russians have that will be coupled soon with actual technological superiority. So that's the Germans' paranoia, and everyone else is paranoid about Germany. The British are definitely paranoid about Germany. How dare they build boats, right? The 2-1 power thing, we can't have that. The Germans are winning all the prizes. They're having all the inventions. They have their famous Kultur that is mocked in the American propaganda. Remember the CPI with the ape with the big bloody stick Kultur? Like, but yeah, the Germans are recognized as the best musicians, poets, artists, philosophers. You know, they are kind of seen. People even like maybe admit it angrily, but yeah, they're the best. It's like if you're a college football fan, you may hate the Alabama Crimson Tide and Nick Saban, but no one's like, oh yeah, they suck at football. They've won something like 6 of the past 10 national championships. That's how people look at Germany. We may hate Alabama/Germany, but we're not going to say that they suck or they're bad. So there's this mutual distrust. That's bad in the July crisis. Both sides are thinking maybe now it's time to strike. How about number 4, A4, French Alsace-Lorraine plus Russian Straits. Forgive me for how much I've talked about Alsace-Lorraine in this class. It's falling out of your ears now, right? But yeah, the French have this obsession with reconquering Alsace-Lorraine, this revanchism going back to the Franco-Prussian War. And the Russians are like, sure, if we get involved, we wouldn't mind taking Byzantium back from the Ottoman Turks. The Ottoman Turks are the sick man of Europe. We keep beating them in all these battles. Catherine the Great certainly did. Whatever she wanted to the Ottomans, took all that Caucasus, Black Sea territory. We wouldn't mind getting involved and getting ours as well. Those are all 4 bad things, right? Delay, mutual distrust, land lust. And number 5, A5, French, Germany, Euro, all bankers. Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of bankers. Sorry. I'm not a huge fan of people who are like, morality doesn't matter. I just want to make money. I take Christ's word seriously in the Sermon on the Mount. You can only serve God or mammon, right? Unfortunately, war is very profitable. And if Dave Schmidt is head of Deutsche Bank and I'm the head of this French bank, we're like, you know, our people go to war, who cares? They'll all die, but we'll make bankroll money, funding the armaments and the munitions and stuff. Bankers are always interested in wars. They love it because it's super profitable, right? The war economy, it's really good. People say in a certain sense, how did America get out of the Great Depression? The Second World War, right? It's like, so yeah, how many people died? And you can say, thank God the Nazis were defeated. Thank God for when wars are just, but are all wars just? I say almost all of them probably are not. But probably the vast majority of wars are not just wars under the Catholic definition. And yet bankers like, I don't give a shit. Like, I want to make tons of money. I want just my bank account to go from 10 million to 10 billion. There's also that going on in Europe. It doesn't matter if it's the suicide of Europe, as Pope Benedict, we're going to read from his letter today, says, it doesn't matter if it's suicidal for Europe. We and everyone, we don't care. We're going to make tons of money on this. So that's also a factor. That's also bad, right? When it doesn't matter if product is good. You know, I'm the head of, you know, whatever, a cigarette company. I don't care that cigarettes do what cigarettes do. Cigarettes are awesome. And nicotine is really addictive. Yeah, tell me what's bad. It's addictive. People are going to buy my product, making tons of money. Yeah, let's do the Marlboro Man commercial. I mean, this is the oldest story in the book, but it's kind of like that cheesy cliche, which nonetheless is true. People over profits. Yeah, that is the ultimate idea here. Excuse me. I wish it was that. Profits over people, right? We want it to be people over profits, but it's the other way around. Okay, B. Jean Jaurès assassination, July 31st, 1914. He is one of the most famous socialists in the world. You can say he's kind of the Karl Marx of his generation. While he's sitting in a restaurant in Paris, a guy walks up, puts a gun in the back of his head and shoots him. Awful. God have mercy on God rest his soul. Compare, I have here in blue ink, to Franz Ferdinand and Rasputin. I mentioned last night in my the AMA that I did with Father Chase. Which both of you attended. Thank you. And Maria, I saw you come in, like it was like 7:05.
It was like 7:30.
And I was like, but it was like, Maria's here, we can start. I was really happy she came. I mentioned last night, I'm dead serious. Like when all the people are in place, like when Sophia's there, Maria's there, and like Molly Schwartz is there, Cecily and Sam, it's like, we can start. If they're not, in fact, Becca Schmidt, I believe she was not there last night, maybe almost canceled the event, but we had to go on for the people, you know.
Last night.
Yeah.
Last meeting.
Oh. I thought I missed your hippo. That's
No. But that's where I was going next. Obviously, I'm all about self-promotion. It's always about me. So I was going to that next. And I said last night, my next hippo, which is in 2 weeks, I think November 3rd, because Spirit Life, I believe, is the second. Spirit Life is the 10th, so it's the second Wednesday, but my hippo is the week before that. I'm going to give a really fun hippo, I think, on conspiracy theory. And the reason I mentioned that is there's a big conspiratorial thing here with that. Maybe it was banker people, maybe it was kind of the shakers and movers and princes, whoever was behind this. They knew who the voices for peace were and they worked to eliminate them. Rasputin, as we're next class, despite all his psycho behavior, was a voice for peace. He gets stabbed back home in Siberia by some crazy woman. Now, you think it really was? Go ahead, your question.
I do, but.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, really.
Okay. So is this woman kind of a lone wolf actor who's just angry that Rasputin is this celebrity back at home? And he does. Rasputin is the first like country star. I'm serious. His town in the middle of nowhere in Siberia is like double below the ground country bumpkin. Like think about country bumpkin 0 level and then like triple it and then times infinity. Like nothing happens there. It's boring. It sucks. Everyone sucks. That's the attitude that people in St. Petersburg have. And then Rasputin is like, but he's the man, like, you know, becomes this kind of crazy cult of personality. Maybe she stabs him because she's jealous. He's on all the magazine covers.
And who was she that stabbed?
I have no idea. Some woman from his town. Some nameless woman. And God have mercy on her, God bless her. I'm not trying to be cheesy. Every person's a precious child of God. I'm not like, oh, this person's irrelevant. But yeah, in terms of the world stage, just some woman from his town. But did she do it or someone put her up to it, right? Hey, woman, I heard you're kind of nuts. Like, why don't you take this knife and go put it in that guy's stomach? You know, I mean, like, there's these conspiracy theories. Franz Ferdinand is actually assassinated. He was a huge voice for peace. Rasputin, a voice for peace, gets stabbed, he survives, but Jaras is also assassinated. So there's a lot of conspiracy that the people that have the power, and like, you know, whoever, the kind of people that want to go to war, me, the head of like the French bank or something, put people up to this kind of stuff, right? And this is the oldest story in the book, right? This guy won't get along with our monetary policy. Oh, unfortunately, the president of blank country died today in an accident, you know. This is one of the oldest stories in the book, right? How many things are actual like natural devices? How many are like this guy didn't want to play ball, so he's out of the picture, right? Awful, horrible, like truly satanic and diabolical. I don't know here. I don't know if that's true, but there are people that say that it is, that there's this peace voice that looking at A6 trying to solve the July crisis, again, forgive the tautology, but peacefully, and yet they had to be eliminated. And Jaras is one of these guys. The question I have though here is socialism. I'm not trying to just like pile on, but socialism sucks, in my opinion. Like, disagree with me or not, fine. Socialism is garbage. I don't think his idea that, ooh, this international brotherhood of socialists got people was going to be a great peaceful solution. I think no matter what his good intentions were, it would lead to what happens in Russia with the kind of coercion and tyranny and kind of, you know, stealing the people's property and just civil war. So I don't know how good this guy. It's tragic that he was assassinated, but let's not make him into some like, oh, only if he lived, he would have united all the workers. You know, what a bunch of BS that. But there is something here with these 3 kind of assassination attempts, 2 of which are successful. The people say maybe higher powers, bigger leaders who are putting people up to this, wanted this July crisis to snowball out of control. Dave, go ahead. You've been holding your thought.
Well, you may have answered it already, and it's tied into what you're saying. When the Archduke was assassinated, and the response was delayed, okay, everything you said. Back at that general time frame, were assassinations kind of
very common
today? And so if this will, yeah, another assassination, whatever, I mean, we're upset, but we'll get there. You know, I'm just wondering.
Yeah. Amazing point. You're 100% right. Unfortunately, this is a time of assassination. William McKinley, our president, is assassinated. Sisi, the beautiful Empress of Bavaria, Franz Josef's wife, was assassinated by anarchists in 1896. And the list is much, much longer. There's something like one major political leader a year on average is assassinated. And there's like one JFK level assassination every year in this time period. Yeah. So it's a great counter argument that, hey, cool it with the conspiratorial stuff. This is just what the time they're living in. Like this is a big thing. So yes. And that definitely is the great foil to that idea of like this grand conspiracy. It's like, no, there wasn't a conspiracy. It was open knowledge that there is rampant political anarchy the world over, and the idea that violence is the answer, sadly, and this is happening, you know, often. So yeah, there you go. Sure. Let me see. The fact that French are embodied in an assassination scandal, like a sex scandal, like not trying to be funny, like a Monica Lewinsky, Bill Clinton thing, with one of the ministers, the wife shoots this editor of the paper. The jilted wife, I think, shoots the editor of the paper for like exposing their story. Forgive me for getting the details, but it basically overshadows Franz Ferdinand's assassination. People say France kind of stumbles into the July crisis because they're all concerned with this great Monica Lewinsky type story, which is based around their assassination, like getting shot with pistols in his office. So it's like there's a lot of that going on. Yeah. I'm going to finish with Pope Benedict's Ad Beatissimi Apostolorum, his November 14th. Great statement on peace, which we're going to go through. I'm going to jump ahead. Number 4, brief notes on Germany, USA, and the future Blessed Emperor Karl. Actually, this will be the penultimate thing I talk about. The last thing I talk about will be E. But just looking ahead, again, we talk about America soon entering the war officially. I actually like this because it's good for remembering, I think, the kind of repetitious nature of it. We're going to talk about, we talked about America already, kind of America up to 1916 and the occupation of Veracruz and the CPI and Wilson and Lusitania. We're going to talk about the US again in great detail soon. We have a class coming up soon, I forget when, maybe the week after next, kind of early November, but it's like all about the US. Like America enters the war is the whole lecture title. It's all about America. It's like you had your first American lecture up to 1916, now it's all America. So I'll go into greater detail then, but basically like, remember the great peace movements in America on the leadership level, the executive level, is Wilson pre-1916. His re-election campaign is he kept us out of the war. This all changes once he becomes re-elected. Wilson, in a certain sense, it invents is wrong. You can say really lays the patent down for, or kind of cements the idea of this American almost Messiah initiative to spread democracy the world over. Look, you don't understand, Dave. I hear what you're saying, that in Afghanistan, there's 6,000 tribes, and they all hate each other, and they hate democracy more. We still have to give them democracy for their own good. You just don't get it. That kind of attitude, America should intervene everywhere and make the world free and safe and kind of stuff. And I'm not mocking that. Obviously, where there are real human rights abuses, those who are in power should help. But if people aren't doing human rights abuses and they want Maria to be their tribal warlord queen, why are we involved in that? Who cares, right? If we're actually all about tolerance and diversity, let them have their own, let them have an absolute monarch, whatever, dude. And yet it seems that often throughout the 20th century, it's like, if we don't like a certain person, we go in and, overthrow them almost just in total scumbag way, like no justification, no just war, but then blame it on them. Like, well, actually they were tyrants. Actually, Maria was awful. And by the way, I mentioned she was a bigot too. Why? Well, you don't get it. She just was. Like, these kind of nonsense justifications after the fact that we totally effed up a country. And what was the purpose of it? Wilson, not to be too hard on him, he kind of starts that again for the 1,000th time. Look what's come out of World War I. He starts the idea of like America has this mission to the world. And so before 1916, when he's like, he kept us out of the war, Wilson wants to be what? Who can help me out? What does Wilson want America's role to be in World War I before we actually get involved?
He wants to be the arbiter.
You are, I'm dead serious, I swear to you, like, I don't know what your IQ is. I'm guessing 200 plus. Like, that's freaking awesome. I'm serious. Yeah, that's exactly right. He doesn't want to not be involved. He doesn't want American people dying. He doesn't want us to like have skin in the game, have our skin get cut, get lacerations of being in the war. But he wants to be front and center as like the dude who gets to mediate. And he may be taking some influence from one of his predecessors, Theodore Roosevelt. Roosevelt won the Nobel Peace Prize for mediating the end to the Russo-Japanese War in 1905. A lot of people don't know that. That's what Wilson wants. Who is the star of the Russo-Japanese War between Russians and Japanese people? An American president. That's what Wilson wants. He wants to be the mediator guy. All right. And when he mediates the influence, he wants to create this new world order. That's the most conspiratorial term, right? You hear that all the time. Denver Airport, NWO. That was used very openly by people like Wilson. An arsenal for democracy, make the world safe for democracy. The president was convinced, Wilson, that if either side of the belligerents won a decisive victory, they would continue doing the old way of things, secret diplomacy, arms races. That's why he warns Americans in 1916, October of 16, quote, "This is the last war of the kind or of any kind that involves the world that the United States can keep out of." So he's already kind of impregnating his intentions post-election, right? This is right before the election. If I get elected, we're gonna have to get involved. He wants this League of Nations new system of collectivized security. What about Germany? About some notes on Germany. And by the way, that's Wilson piece. I'm going to give you so much on what the Irish thought, the Germans thought, women's groups thought, pacifist groups, church groups, when we talk about America. I don't want to just repeat everything a million times. So I'll save that for that lecture down the road. Because it's exciting too, like something to look forward to. Germany, what about their kind of peace initiatives? Well, there's kind of two distinct periods you can say with German peace initiatives. In the early part of the war, 1914 through 16, Germany might itself be interested in some kind of the Wilson US type mediation stuff. All right. What they are looking for, though, always, right? What they want is to, I'd say I would explain Germany's war aims vis-a-vis peace in this kind of way. Eliminate forever that threat of encirclement and gain the minimum concessions. This is like a tip of the hat to German intelligence, truly, German brilliance. Get the most we can without pissing everybody off, right? Theobald von Bethmann-Hollweg, the guy who I really like, the German chancellor, he says to the Russians, quote, "We only want small concessions in order to protect our eastern border, as well as financial and commercial treaties." Let me read that again, and let's stop there with the Germans. We'll save them again for later, for more details as well. I really want to get to Benedict's today. But let's say that kind of sums up, and by the way, to not leave an empty thread, leave an empty thread untangled. Post 1916 into 1917, the Germans are really going to, in my opinion, dedicate even more effort towards the kind of Eastern politic, towards the East where they're winning. They're going to win this great concession, the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk, in March of 1918 from the communists who have already taken over the country, sadly, after the Russian Revolution. And there, the Germans later in the war will kind of direct their efforts at, okay, we won this massive thing in Russia, just holding on in the Western Front, which has become a stalemate attrition, no one wins, and hopefully leaving unscathed, if that makes any sense. Like, we don't have to win in the West anymore. We've gone far beyond the quote that I'll read again. Only small concessions in order to protect our eastern border, that means into Poland, Russia, as well as financial and commercial treaties. Start with the second part of that quote. We Germans like how 1871 to 1914 has been going. We're the top dog in Europe. We want to continue to build economic growth and strength. We felt suffocated, this point number A3, being afraid of the Russian armament and the kind of the threats from the French, who always hate our guts, you know, especially post-Franco-Prussia. If we can just get enough concessions that you guys won't be too pissed and allow us to have some territory and you kind of get off our back, okay. But von Bethlen-Hollweg, I think, is the most reasonable German guy in the whole war. Like, Ludendorff goes full dictator later on. Hindenburg is just the old kind of like the you know, I call him the wooden titan or something. Makes me think of like a big babushka doll. It's like the wooden Pinocchio or whatever. Yeah, like literally, like he's a blimp of a man. He's a huge man. He really was. He was like, imagine Theodore Roosevelt. I swear, like it's wrong to make fun of someone's physical appearance. I'm not doing this. I mean this. If you were to call someone a walrus, that seems like a very mean thing to say. I actually mean it as a compliment. Like, Theodore Roosevelt looked like a walrus in a good way. Like, I don't mean, oh, he was like so fat. He wasn't. He was like a thick bull of a man guy. I mean that he had the whiskers. He looked like he had like this dominant walrus kind of guy. I think I explained that rationally enough, right? I'm serious. If I was like, oh, you know, my friend, oh yeah, you know, he's a total walrus, that'd be a very mean thing to say. You imagine I'm saying like, oh, I'd be making fun of his weight or something. I don't mean it that way. I mean, like, he was like the way a walrus dominates like their ice shelf or something. That is like, this analogy is going great. That's like what Hindenburg and Roosevelt have, that outsized kind of, you know, personality kind of thing. And they kind of push it forward, I think, almost towards this kind of tyrannical, my way or the highway type behavior. Not so much for Bethlen-Hollweg, I think, and that's why he's canned eventually. That's what happens to people who are rational, right? They get fired and sent away. So anyways, that's it for Germany. The last thing I want to talk about is we're going to do a whole lecture too on one of my favorite people of all time. I pray to this guy every single day. I pray for his intercession. Blessed Emperor Karl. He's beatified. He's known as the Peace Emperor. And him and his wife Zita were devout Catholics, like psycho bonker Catholics in like the most beautiful way, like legit Catholics. There were a lot of Catholic kings and queens who were Catholic in name only, but had like mistresses and whatever, like, you know, did all that kind of garbage and were just scumbag people. Like Blessed Emperor Karl and Zita were like holy people, like literally the rare kind of people that are actual like philosophy, like politician saint people. Apropos the question last night, what they were asking, like, why are not politicians canonized and enough like that. Here's a great example. He actually wanted Charles, who is Blessed Emperor Karl, first of all, who is Charles the First. He is the guy who takes over for Franz Joseph when he dies. Okay, Franz Joseph, old Kaiser of Austria-Hungary. Who's his successor? Franz Ferdinand. When Franz Ferdinand is assassinated in Sarajevo, the guy that takes over is this great Catholic leader, Charles. He not immediately. Franz Joseph dies, I think, November 21st of 1916. So it's not until 2 years into the war. Charles, though, Blessed Emperor Karl, Charles or Karl, whatever you prefer, you pick, same name, same guy. It's like Michel in French is just Michael, you know, whatever. Charles or Karl, he's the last Austro-Hungarian emperor, excuse me. He's the last king of the Austro-Hungarians. He sends his brother-in-law, Sixtus. What a freaking sweet name. If my wife and I have a third son, we're definitely gonna name him Sixtus. I'm not even kidding. Sixtus is so sick with it. It's so on the nose Catholic. Maybe I'll get his middle name, will give him like Brent. You know, like he can choose. He's like, Dad, you know, like people are bullying me in school, nicknaming me Vatican. You know, it's like you just go by Brent, you know, but like Sixtus, like his freaking sweet name. Yeah, seriously. What if you're like, and make sure you guys go out today and vote, you know, support our candidate, Sixtus Smith. You're like, he's already got my vote. Like, what a mensch, you know, what a boss.
Well, it wouldn't be Smith. What is your last name?
Anderson. but it's not pronounced how Sixtus Kraszewski. I know that's sweet, right?
That is pretty good.
It's freaking cool.
Yeah, I go with that.
The only problem is our first boy's name is Soren. And no offense to people who do this, like, oh, we have 4 daughters and their names all start with M. Let's see that. I feel like he's getting ripped off. Like, we already gave that letter to Soren, so Sixtus would be like, I don't know. Charles instructs Sixtus, his brother-in-law, to go and try to make deals throughout Europe. Okay, and trust me, this is another thing like to be continued. We're gonna do I assigned a book for you on Charles by Charles Colomb. If you wanted to read, go back to the syllabus, you want to buy this book, just a whole biography of him. I'm gonna do an entire class on Blessed Emperor Karl, like I'm doing on Rasputin next class. You'll have him all in your head. But this is an important peace initiative. He instructs Sixtus to say that he, the Austro-Hungarian Kaiser, would give the French Alsace-Lorraine. They can have it if they come to the table. He's very, very balanced. He agrees to restore Serbia. That seems pretty benevolent from him. Serbia, remember, falls in 1916. Isn't Serbia the guy that killed his cousin or whoever, Franz Ferdinand? Right? He said, you guys can have Serbia back. And you're right, it's not, maybe we went too far. You know what he tells Belgium? Belgium will be restored totally. We're not going to make Belgium our vassal state. See why this guy is so holy and cool? I'm being serious. And guess who F's it up? Guess who screws all this up? What country? It's the country that just does nothing, sucks at war, is on the back like, hey, eating their pizza and stuff. Wow, this sounds so like xenophobic right now.
Turkey.
Not Turkey. Yeah. How did you get Turkey from eating
Italy,
pizza?
right?
It's Italy.
Yeah.
Italy decides after doing nothing in the war, and I say this to people on the Zoom, I'm a huge Italiophile, whatever. I love Italy. I love Italy so much. Seriously. Even down to linguistics. Like I will always, no offense, sorry, I will always choose Italian over Spanish. I can't motivate myself not to do Spanish. I just want to do Italian so bad. And I love Italy. So I have to say that again, like really. So no offense, but Italy, what a joke right here. Like when Karl was trying to make all these deals, Italy is the one bleeping beep who's done nothing the whole time, and more expletives and huge expletives and sign language expletives, has done nothing. And now they decide to put the fly in ointment too and say to Austria-Hungary, to Charles, nope, none of this works for us because we want your territory. Like we don't like any of these things. We want you to give up, like Trieste and a bunch of stuff.
You don't really have any kind of power.
And they have no claim, yeah. They have power, yeah. It's called betraying the Central Powers and latching onto the British, suckling from the British she-wolf. That was their power.
Okay.
Daddy Britain is going to come give them the territory. Yeah,
Were
sorry.
they in fact
Facts, truth hurts. What?
Did they in fact have, official alliance, treaty, what have you, with Britain?
Well, they entered the war and decided allies after having an official alliance with Britain, with having an emperor alliance with Austria-Hungary, but also doing a secret deal with France to tell no one about. Hey, this is my black book, don't worry about it, yeah. No, it's kind of like when I think about Italy, all I can think about is a quote from our esteemed current president, Joseph Biden, who said during one press conference, he was getting upset. He's like, listen, man, I'm talking about the difference between truth and facts. So that's all I can say about Italy right now, okay? On the one hand, you have truth and you have facts, okay? You have to understand what I'm going to say. Yeah, okay. So, Pope Benedict the 15th, ad Beatissimi Apostolorum, All Saints Day, 1914. This is Pope Benedict's great proclamation to the Christian world: stop committing civilizational suicide, stop fighting each other. What are some things he says? I'm going to read you from the document. You can follow along if you want on Vatican.va. I think it is. Yeah, that's actually it. Sweet. No, really, I was just like Vatican.blank XYZ, and it's actually Vatican.va. Awesome. If you want the full hyperlink, I'm sure you remember this: Vatican.va/content/Benedict 15/EN/encyclicals/documents /HF_Ben XV ENC 011111914.
What are these forward slashes?
Forward slashes, whatever. There's an interview. There's an interview with these two people I like to watch. the one woman, her name is Satura Lanks, and they speak Latin to each other. And this guy, he's an American, he asks her in Italian, like, how do you say backslash? And she's like, barara laterale. So barara laterale is front slash or backslash in Italian. I remember that. I'm really proud of that because he didn't know how to say it. He went full American, and he was like, truth and facts, and she told him how to say it. So it is what it is. You know.
Thank you for that.
Thanks for that. Okay. So what does Benedict say? All right. Here's how it opens up. Okay. And by the way, ad beatissimi apostolorum encyclical of Benedict, appealing for peace. Okay. To address to all the bishops, all the people in the world. Venerable brethren, greeting and apostolic benediction. Raised by the inscrutable counsel of divine providence, without any merit of our own, to the chair of the Prince of Apostles, we hearken to those words of Christ, our Lord, addressed to Peter, feed my lambs, feed my sheep. Okay. By Christ, for the whole of mankind was freed from the slavery of sin by the shedding of blood of Jesus Christ as their ransom, and there is no one who is excluded from the benefit of redemption. Hence, the divine pastor has one part of the human race already happily sheltered within the fold. Okay, so he begins by just saying, like, I, as successor of Peter, am speaking to all Catholics the world over. I, of course, am the pastor of all Christians, even those who don't even acknowledge it yet, right? Or are separated brethren. So he opens up by framing the question in this piece encyclical as all of you should take a good look in the mirror and realize your fundamental allegiance should be to Christ, should be to your religious identity, and you're fighting each other. It's brothers fighting brothers. All right. And he says, number 3, okay. Where is bitter sorrow? Where is this right here? I've made notes and then I have to find them in the text. Okay. Point number 3, as soon as we were able from the height of apostolic dignity to survey at a glance the course of human affairs, our eyes were met by the sad conditions of human society, and we could not but be filled with bitter sorrow. For what could prevent the soul of the common father of all being most deeply distressed by the spectacle presented by Europe? This is November 1st. This is already, what, 2 months after the Marne, 3 months after those missiles that hit the forts at Liège, bury, explode, the Battle of the Frontiers. After Tannenberg, a lot of blood has already been spilled. Hundreds of thousands of people have died already when he writes this, despite this being not even the first war, the year of the war completed. The spectacle presented by Europe, nay, the whole world, perhaps the saddest and most mournful of which there is any record. So already, just 2 months in, he's saying this is the worst calamity to befall maybe all of human history. He quotes our Lord, he's saying, you shall hear of wars and rumors of wars, nation rising against nation, kingdom against kingdom. Matthew 24, verses 6 and 7. So he's already putting it into the biblical proportion as well as frame. I think, the Pope, as your shepherd, I think I'm not wrong in saying I am witnessing what I believe to be something of biblical proportions. A truly world-changing paradigm. We're going to revisit him in another encyclical at the end of the war and see where he comes after it actually all comes to place, when it's 41 million people who have been wounded and killed, not just a couple 100,000, which already is way too much. Who would recognize brothers whose father is in heaven? Yet while the numberless troops, the furious battles engaged, the sad cohorts of war, sorrow, distress, swoop down upon every city and every home. Day by day, the mighty number of widows and orphans increases, and with the interruption of communications, trade is at a standstill, agriculture abandoned, the arts reducing activity, the wealthy are in difficulties, poor and abject misery, all are in distress. I guess it's just pointing out kind of, what is obvious at this point, right? Already here we have, in these first 2 wars, nothing but distress and across the spectrum. And if the poor who already are living a tough life are getting poorer, it is affecting the rich, international commerce, all things, right? So point number 4 really gets to the immediate kind of point here. Moved by these great evils, we thought it our duty, ... And I encourage you again to read this. You can type in this apostolic letter and find it immediately online. You can read the whole thing for yourself. To hasten to restore to the nations the blessings of peace. Okay. God grant by his mercy and blessing that glad tidings the angels brought at the birth of the divine Redeemer of mankind may soon echo forth as we his vicar enter upon this work. On earth, peace to men of goodwill. Okay, so the whole point of me writing this letter is aiming for that peace which Christ alone, the Prince of Peace, can give. Okay, in point number 6, we'll talk about this right here, an amazing point. Our Lord Jesus Christ came down from heaven for the very purpose of restoring amongst men the kingdom of peace, which the envy of the devil had destroyed, and it was his that it should rest on no other foundation than brotherly love. You know, what in Matthew chapter 22, 36 through 40, what does it say after talking about love God above all and neighbors yourself? This is the law and the prophets. That always struck me. That if you love God above all and love neighbor yourself, you fulfill all of the law, all of the things that was led to Jewish righteousness in the Torah, right? And all of the prophets, every holy person that God has ever sent to speak in his name. All the law, all the works, all the faith, all the decrees of God are summed up in love God above all, love your neighbor as yourself. And he's saying here, and again, too, how does the Sermon on the Mount end in chapter 7 of Matthew's Gospel? He who's built his foundation on sand, who hears not my words, be washed away. But he who builds on this foundation, like, you know, building on stone, on solid rock, and when the storms came, you know, battered, it did not blow away. I think he's saying so much in one sentence here. The only foundation for true world peace is not all the stuff we're talking about here, not the stuff that we'll talk about later with Woodrow Wilson and New World Order and the peace leagues and, oh, Wilson, if you really are for peace, Maria, you should be for war because it's a war to end all wars. No, the only foundation for peace, the vicar of Christ is saying, is on Christ himself. And Christ himself has commanded from his own blessed lips that if you really are about peace, you will love your neighbor, right? I leave you a new commandment, love one another as I love you. The 15th chapter of St. John's Gospel. If you actually, you know, if you love me, you will keep my commandments. The law and the prophets, full summation is to love your neighbor. And he's summing all this up at this point in that one kind of paradigm. That this war is evil fundamentally because it's being fought by Christians in a suicidal act, brother against brother in fratricidal hatred, not on the foundation of Christ and peace. And he warns them throughout this letter as you go through, which again, I highly recommend you read it, the whole thing. I'm just going to read you some small excerpts, of course. I recommend you read it. I mandate that you read it. What a joke, right? No, like, don't read it if you don't want to, fine. But if you want to go point by point, it's not very long. It's only 33 sections. So it could probably take you, I don't know, 35 minutes to read in total. Maybe not even that, depending on how fast you read. But the ultimate point is, he's saying, I think, there's this thing happening now that's biblical in proportion, the worst ever. And the fact that it's written in November of 1914, really chronologically is beautiful, that they've only started.
Yeah.
They've only
Not
just,
even half a year into it.
not even half a year, it just began. And he's already bemoaning it, rightfully so, because of all the death, all the hundreds of thousands of people needlessly killed. For what? Spoiler alert, nothing, right? Stupid nothing. And he says this, in fact, here. Here it is. This is an amazing point in verse 11 or paragraph 11. The fate of our first parent after the fall is wont to come also upon nations. As in his case, no sooner had his will turned from God than his unchained passions rejected the sway of the will. Augustine, our patron here, talked about libido dominandi, talked about the city of man being driven by, what is libido? Like lust, right? Lust for dominance, right? This libido to dominate your fellow man. And he's saying here, hey, this isn't a secret. This is Catholic Doctrine 101. Why are people tearing themselves apart in fratricidal violence? Because of libido dominandi. Because they've gone away from the foundation Christ established, have sought other foundations, which we know is building your house on sand. So F immediately, epic failure. And instead of brotherly love, it's brotherly hate. And are you surprised? If all you have left is hatred, then all I want to do is dominate Sophia's country, right? I hate her. I don't look at her as my sister in Christ. I look at her as a rival empress and I want to destroy her country. And that's what's happening here. He's like, this isn't surprising. It's just original sin, unchecked passions. And the worst of passions often is that lust for dominance and being a conqueror, right? And doing what the devil did. That's the original fall of the devil, right? I will not serve, right? The devil wanted to be God. So we want to be the top dog in Europe or whatever it is. He's saying this is just, it's not hard to find the causes here. This letter is genius, is brilliant, is incredible. It's not complex. It's very simple. That's the method. If you're looking for some crazy thing like he's going to reveal something, actually this document the German chancellor wrote on June 7th with the secret, there's no secret last night about Gnosticism, secret knowledge. There's no secret knowledge here, right? Alexander Solzhenitsyn, I'll close with that, we'll finish. And I'll let you read that yourself later on. But Solzhenitsyn had a thing that's very, very worth repeating, I think. Solzhenitsyn, everyone know who that is? Who's not know who this is? And it's fine. Yeah, he wrote the Gulag Archipelago, and he won the Nobel Prize for it. He's like he's a Russian author. He's very much seen as kind of like a modern day Tolstoy, you can say, very much for the people, anti-Westernism, anti-enlightenment, for like Russian Orthodoxy. And Solzhenitsyn told a beautiful story, and you're probably going to guess right away where I'm going with this, but he's giving a speech in the 80s, and he's like, I've been studying the reason for Russia's sorry state all my life, he said, for decades. And when I first started out, I wanted to know why had all those people been killed by Stalin, why had all this evil befallen our country? And all of these, for lack of a better word, stupid country bumpkin hick guys, and he's saying this not as an insult, it's kind of like, yeah, these people that people would like, the world would brush off. All of them would just repeat ad nauseum, it's because people have forgotten God. And he's like, when I was starting up my research, I was like, okay, buddy, that's great. All this happened because people forgot God. Yeah, right. And he's like, now after 40 years of research and maybe knowing more about this than anyone else, I've come to the conclusion that all this happened because people forgot about God. But that country wisdom was right all along. And that's what this letter is about. There's nothing complex here. It's like all this evil happened because people forgot about God, wanted to make themselves God like the devil did. What does the devil say to Adam and Eve, right? You will be like gods, knowing good from evil, right? You will make your own rules. You will have relativism. I'm not, because he's the father of all lies, he's not gonna tell them the spoiler, and that's really gonna suck for you. It's gonna be disastrous and horrible. You weren't made for that. You're gonna create a living hell for yourself. It doesn't say that. He says, oh, you'll be like God. You'll know good from evil, right? And from that, sin and death and suffering are brought into the world. And that Genesis lesson is relearned here in a very horrible way, with 41 million people being killed. And the Pope says it's the same exact story played out. People weren't content to live in brotherly love and cooperation. They had to make themselves their own gods and know good from evil. And you learn what good and evil is in the trenches that ever done. There's your reward. There you go. There's your that. It almost sounds like an inappropriate cliche, but truly, like play stupid games, win stupid prizes. You wanted to play this game of nationalistic competition, hating your brothers. This is the reward. The trenches ever done. So, speaking of, we're actually going to end on a very somber note. Point E. Okay, the reason for the hoped peace. How about first accounts of how awful the war is? We've read some of these already, but maybe it's worth revisiting. As in the war chronology, we're stopping right now. We're paused. We've covered perfectly all the theaters from 14 through early 17. But like I said, remember last class, we're looking ahead. So Peter, Fatima, the close of the war. How about some firsthand accounts? These are just random firsthand accounts that are connected today of like, this is why peace is so desirable. This is why please be a man and a woman of the Beatitudes. Please try to live, blessed are the peacemakers, because you don't want this to become your reality. A British soldier, quote, first time that I had killed anybody, as far as I know, and when things quieted down, I went and looked at a German I knew I had shot. I remember thinking he looked old enough to have a family, and I felt very sorry. Imagine that guy, that small quote, that British soldier, he's haunted by that for the rest of his life. I killed someone's daddy, right? Like we can like mock that, like whatever, no, I'm sure that was absolutely effing horrifying the rest of his life. Did he murder the guy? No, he was a soldier doing his duty. If the guy would have killed him, it would have been the same thing you imagine. This wasn't like some kind of evil malicious thing. The guy surrendered, but he killed him in cold blood. But imagine even that, even just doing your duty, man. And where's my daddy? He's not coming home because what I did. Can't imagine the burden of that, right? Another British soldier. We were just meant to be sacrificed. That's why I'm going this on. We ran into a wall of steel. As they were advancing, quote, a chap who had the bottom of his jaw blown off still kept going forward until he dropped. Because imagine you're walking forward, and you see a guy next to you, his jaw blown off, and he's still going on almost like zombie style. There are so many things beyond my ken, beyond my realm of understanding. I have never served in the armed forces. God bless the men and women who've done that truly, God bless them. I have no idea what this is like, none. Like I'd be the ultimate poser to pretend like, ooh, I have no idea what that was like. I can imagine that haunts you forever, seeing someone get their jaw blown off in front of you, no matter how desensitized you are from that over and over again, right? This is B.L. Lawrence, another German soldier about German trenches, about when they captured German trenches. There were plenty of dugouts in the trench. Everyone was rather scared entering them. All sorts of booby traps, explosive dugouts, so on, were in circulation. Some of them were only too true. The battalion was relieved. The battalion we relieved had several casualties. In one case, a man found a full rum jar, which upon being uncorked exploded. In another case, a man picked up a spade, which set off a mine. Okay, so not only is this like hell on earth, like, yeah, that's your reward for this lustful libido dominandi going to war. Not only is war not Augusta Leibniz and awesome, there's no break from the psychological terror of war. Think about that. I'm in the trench, we've had a successful battle. I'm a soldier, so I feel good about that. Maybe that's the one like football part of it. We won this game and that's good. And I do believe in the righteousness of our cause. Right when I want to sit down to just even have just a sip of rum, just to relax my mind, it kills me. It's a bomb as well. Like you never can relax, but
Well, I'm not quite sure I followed that. So they had captured a German section of trench and that's where that happened?
the
or-
Germans had their trench. And I imagine the Germans had like, here's the rum we drink, here's the booby trap rum.
Oh,
Like they had planned all this.
maybe he grabbed the wrong one.
And exactly, he wouldn't know because they captured the German trench they retreated from. And he took the one that it worked horrifyingly. You know, the German soldiers in the trench would know, don't touch that. Those are the booby trap bomb ones that blow up on you. That's the ones we hope that will happen when the Allies, if they take our trench. Right,
Again, like the Vietnam stories.
exactly.
Movie traps.
Yeah. Major Frederick Rose talks about the Hindenburg Line devastation. You remember last class talked about the spring offensive. That's where we pick up the chronology next. April 1917, the Nivelle offensive. If this doesn't work in 48 hours, I'll call it off. The French guy, and it does it, he doesn't call it off. They keep tweaking the way we pass. 2 million people die. It was just the same thing, same story. Now, spoiler alert, everything you read so far, the exact same thing's gonna keep happening in the Western Front. Nothing happens to the Western Front until the very end. The restarting of the Battle of Movement when Pershing and the AEF arrived in the summer of 18 in full force. But the spring of 1970, remember the Germans were like, let's do more defensive tactics, let's like scorch our own earth, right? It is disgraceful the way the Bosch Germans have blown up the villages they have left and cut down the trees and blown huge mine craters in the roads. We got an ammunition wagon with 6 horses and 3 drivers down one about 35 feet. We managed to get the horses and the ammunition out and the drivers, but the wagon is still there. So the Germans were so good at devastating their own kind of like creating this new no man's land as they set the Hindenburg Line, the defense in depth backwards. They make a freaking crater 35 feet deep. That's really freaking deep. I was still creeped out like when I was a kid, like going to the deep end of the pool. It's like 14 feet deep. This is double that, you know, a freaking crater down in the earth. This is horrifying. Just like, and I'm not going to play some cheesy like, oh, and think about the environment, Mother Earth being 30. I'm not talking about that. I'm saying it's creepy that someone could blow up a hole 35 feet deep, like without modern whatever. I don't know what they used to do this. An Ohio soldier, American, Dalton Smith Hayes, the grandson of former President Rutherford B. Hayes, is a soldier fighting on the Western Front. He writes this to his mom, quote, I saw Jerry about 200 yards away aiming his rifle in my direction. The thought sprang to my head, here's where I'll make the score 3 instead of 2. And I jerked my rifle up. That's the last I remember, so I woke up flat on my back in a shell hole, my shoulder hurting with ticking. I laughed, he survived. Like, that's amazing, incredible to think like, you know, well, and then I don't remember next I'm here. Well, I guess I must have got my butt kicked. I lost that quick draw, right? Or whatever, you know, but like, that's actually so sad. This is so awful. This is like, that's a positive story. Right, this is how awful it is. That's actually funny. You can laugh. That like he survived. He just got shot in the shoulder. That's it. You know, no big deal, right? This is how awful the reality is. They went before the war, living normal lives, having coffee with their fiancés and coffee shops, living the nice life. Actually, before when I was joking about, I was talking about wildflowers. Yeah, walking through wildflowers and things. To now that being like a normal day. To now a good day being I only got shot in the shoulder. Right. Here the guy talks about a German guy surrendering. British guy surrendering. A British soldier writing a report of a German surrendering. I shall never forget one German who surrendered. He came towards us with his hands up and said in perfect English, quote, I wish to surrender. He was a middle-aged man and wore spectacles. We had a talk with him. He told us that he felt confident that Germany would win. He surprised us somewhat by telling us that he was, until the war broke out, engaged as a head waiter in a big London hotel. He gave us a number of cigars and cigarettes and said quite frankly that he would be far more comfortable with us than he would have been with the German army. Personally, I cannot say that I was at all inclined to treat this individual with very much kindness. I would have been better content to have given the helping advantage of my boot, but that sort of thing does not do in the army. What a D-bag this guy. Like the guy comes over, he's like, he speaks good English, first of all, waiter in a London restaurant, awesome. He gives you cigars and you want to fight him? What? This guy earns tool bag award. This is the last time I read here. Last one. Or maybe, well, a couple ones. Okay, last 2 maybe. This is from a writer from South Africa who talks about what no man's land in the trenches are like. Maybe this is one of the ultimate examples, kind of like how, you know, how awful this was. Out in no man's land, quote, the sun swelled up the dead with gas and often turned them blue, almost navy blue. God rest his people's souls. The dead, their skin was turning blue. Then when the gas escaped, the bodies dried up like mummies and were frozen in their death positions. Sitting bodies, kneeling bodies, bodies in almost every position, though most on their bellies or on their backs. The crows pecked out the eyes, and rats lived on bodies that lay in the abandoned dugouts. These rats were very large and quite fearless, their familiarity with the dead having made them contemptuous of the living. One night, one fell on my face and bit me. On the face of it, oh, that's funny. That's absolutely horrifying. That sounds absolutely horrifying. If rats had no diseases, it'd still be terrible. But then on top of it, right, just absolutely horrifying. Where we fought several times on the same ground, bodies became incorporated in the material in the trenches themselves. They were putrid, the consistency of camembert cheese. How horrifying and dehumanizing is the bodies would be ground up in the kind of mill of the dirt of everything, right? I once fell and put my right hand through the belly of a man. It was days before I got the smell out of my meals. But again, for anybody who goes to war thinking it's gonna be fun and glorious and all the girls back home will love me, I'm a war hero, right? This is what it's like, right? This is what it's like. And here's some final things from Passchendaele. This is third Ypres. And Passchendaele is just a section of, Passchendaele actually happened 104 years ago. It's going on now, like October into November 1917. The Battle of Passchendaele is happening now. Some people say there's no three battles in Ypres, there's one battle in Ypres. That first Ypres, which hardens the Western Front, remember, second Ypres is the gas attack, and Passchendaele, third Ypres, there's one continuous battle in these Flanders fields, however you want to put it. But what's awful about Passchendaele, we're going to talk about Passchendaele probably for 30 minutes in this class. We're going to give it good treatment. Some battles we spend 5 minutes on. We're going to give Passchendaele the Verdun, Somme, almost whole class treatment. Passchendaele is, Ypres in general is only 66 feet above sea level. That year they have record floods. They literally have people at Passchendaele falling off the duck boards, drowning to death in like quagmires in the mud. They have 30 feet. Imagine those Indiana Jones movies where he falls in the quicksand. That's what Passchendaele becomes like, because the shell holes tear up the ground. It's raining nonstop, and it's already basically at sea level. It's like they're fighting in a marshy swamp. Here's one soldier I describes it. Passchendaele. There is no ground to walk on. The earth had been plowed up by shells, not only once, but over and over again, so thoroughly that nothing solid remained to step on. There is just loose, disintegrated, far-flung earth merging into slimy, treacherous mud, and water around shell holes so interlaced, the circular form of only the largest and most recently made could be distinguished. The infantry in the outposts moved hourly from shell hole to shell hole, occupying those that had just been made and which had not, in consequence, yet filled with water. All honor to them for the way they, quote, stuck it. Covered with mud, wet to the skin, bitterly cold, stiff and benumbed with exposure, crowded and deadened by the monotony of 48 hours in extreme danger, by the constant casualties among their mates, they hung on to existence by a thin thread of discipline rather than any spark of life. Okay, so again, maybe what's worse of all of this stuff, and I don't know what's worse than having to walk across open field in the Somme and get eaten by machine gun fire or get blown up by artillery, is the endless psychological horror of living with dead bodies ground up amongst you, rats biting you. When we talked about how awful the trenches were earlier in the class, there were a lot of people who were more scared of the rats than the things, and I get it. Like I personally, I don't like when there's like a spider in our house. I have to go kill a spider. It's just creepy, right? Spiders, whatever. I imagine you live in that. Like you live in that, plus everything else. I don't understand how anyone in this war didn't have psychological trauma. I heard one historian once talk about Ernst Younger, the guy whose book I assigned as well. And again, I use assign in scare quotes. Like, I actually, if you guys were all getting grades in this class, and it was like, this was like 6 credits, it was the U of I, ultimate honors course. I still would probably make the books optional. We cover enough in class. Coming to class really gets you a good, we're doing a lot. Like I said, my favorite podcast ever, which inspired me to do this class, I mentioned this, by this guy named Dan Carlin. By the way, I highly recommend you get this. Dan Carlin does something called Hardcore History, and he did a thing called Blueprint for Armageddon. I felt so jealous of that title. When I'm like, what a beautiful title. I would love to name this class that, but probably copyright issues. By the way, I'm trying to get Dan Carlin to come to WSU. If he does, I'll invite you guys. Over at WSU, I'm going on so many rabbit holes, forgive me, but over at WSU, I'm part of the gallery committee there. And me and my colleagues are gonna try to invite Dan Carlin to do to judge a gallery. It'll be so fun to have him come. And Kate especially is like ultimate fangirl for Dan Carlin, so we'd love to just meet him. But Dan Carlin, Kate and I, my wife, will listen to his whole Blueprint of Armageddon. which is like his longest podcast, it's 24 hours long. It's 6 sections, each like 4 hours long. It covers the whole First World War. I say with a little bit of pride, I love that John Baptist quote, I'm unworthy to loose the thongs of his sandals, speaking about our Lord. Dan Carlin's the man. Like, I'm nothing compared to him. Watch Blueprint Armageddon, I'm sure is so much better than what I can give you. He's a good job. But I'm very pumped that Dan Carlin's podcast, Blueprint for Armageddon, is 24 hours long. Our class is 40 hours, literally. Like, think about every class is an hour and a half podcast episode. We cover 40 hours of the war. So almost like, one time more than him. What I'm getting at is if this was a legit class of like grades, I still would probably make the books optional because we already cover so much. We're already doing a 40-hour podcast on this. But one of the books in there is Ernst Younger's Storm of Steel. And one of these, Carlin actually said this. He talked about Ernst Younger. He's like, there's probably no guy who is more badass, for lack of a better word, but like badass intended. Like, that's the best way to describe him. He's like totally fearless, amazing soldier than Ernst Younger, who was like, loved the war, like in a good way. Like, he loved doing his duty. He wasn't scared. And even he like at points like, oh shizzle, oh crap, I'm terrified because the war was so bad. How about just for people who don't have superhuman will, let's say, who aren't like, crazy brave, they break immediately, And there's all these kind of tragedies early in the war, some people getting executed for treason and desertion. Like, how horrifyingly sad. These poor boys, like 18-year-old kids who just broke under fire. Why would they not? I bet a lot of us from the first, just seeing the Big Bertha gun start sprinting their direction before it even starts firing. Okay, you guys are all the best, the coolest. You have a great weekend, and next Tuesday. I'm not trying to build this up too much. I hope every lecture that we had, you're like, that was really, I got something out of it. I'm not trying to like Rasputin's gonna be the best class ever, but it's gonna be a fun lecture. You get to know all the kind of personal details of his life. And it's fun too. I think biography is fun that way, in that we just focus on one person. Next class is only Rasputin for an hour and a half. So I'll see you guys then.